Carol, I just sent a request to send me an invitation, and then I found the invitation.
Oh, good. So I
I'm
can
one of
ignore
your
it.
new alternates.
Okay, great. Do you go by Bob?
Bob, yes, that
Okay,
works.
excellent.
So please
Great.
ignore that request, Aaron and Carol.
Welcome.
How are you? Welcome aboard.
I have a lot to learn. I'm looking
Let's
forward.
do a round of introductions. We've got quite a few new members joining us today.
Great.
Hi, Michael.
Is that the Janet Peckinpah?
Hey, how are you? Long time no see.
Indeed.
Nice to see you, John.
Oh.
Were you surprised to see my name on here?
I was. I knew you left town, but I forgot about the Madison of it all.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Janet.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, Carol.
Hello.
Awesome.
Welcome aboard. We'll just wait till the rest of us get here and then we'll do a round of introductions, all right?
Yeah, sounds good. Aaron, do we know is Giselle attending?
I have not received confirmation.
Let's see. Hi, Elliot.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Shauna.
Oh,
Hey. Hi, Carol. Hi, Elliot.
It's exciting seeing new faces.
Hey, who are these people?
I know what's good about Zoom is we can see what your names are until we get to know each other.
That's important.
Couple more minutes maybe and see if anyone else joins us. And we are going to do quick introductions, so heads up. Aaron, do you see anyone else trying to sign in?
no, I think we could get going.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I would like to call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of Thursday, November 3rd, 2022 to order. And welcome to our new members. We're now up to 7 full members and 2 alternates, which is very exciting. I thought we'd do a quick sort of lightning round of introductions, both of our new members and also of us, because I know when I joined, I had no idea who anyone was on the commission for several months, it seemed. So I'm going to start and I'm going to go down the good list that we've been provided of all of our names and contact info. So I'm Carol Snow, I'm chair. I joined the Planning and Zoning Commission in early 2021, actually, and became chair in January of 2022. I grew up at the end of Neck Road in Madison and graduated from Daniel Hand High School, went to Skidmore College, got a master's degree in art conservation from the Winterthur University of Delaware program, and then worked in museums up and down the East Coast and also on archaeological sites around the Mediterranean before settling down to have kids, raised my family in Weston, Massachusetts, and ran a small business in art conservation, serving mostly the major museums in Boston. I moved back to Madison in 2008 when I got a job from Yale and retired from that job in 2019. So I do a little bit of contract work, but I try to say I'm retired. And my interest in planning and zoning, it was sort of bred in the bone because my father was on the Planning and Zoning Commission for many, many years in Madison while I was growing up. And in fact, instead of getting babysitters, I would be taken to planning and zoning meetings. So I have a lot of history there. And that's pretty much it for me. I'm going to turn it over, going down the list, to Shauna Hay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shona Hay. My first name is very hard to pronounce, as you can see. So just think of it as Shona. That's the easiest way to remember how to pronounce it. So I grew up in Maryland, Bethesda, and then moved here to do my residency with my husband in internal medicine in 1996, and moved to Madison 17 years ago. And we have raised our two daughters here, and they are both now grown. One is 24, the other one is 21. And I joined planning and zoning in 2017, I think. I don't really remember, which is terrible. But I've been on the commission now for a number of years. I'm one of the old timers at this point. And my day job is that I'm the Associate Chief of Staff for Education at the West Haven VA Hospital, and I work also at Yale University School of Medicine.
Thank you. Elliot Hitchcock, our secretary.
Yes, my name is Elliot Hitchcock. I am the Secretary of the Commission. I've been on the commission now for somewhere between 7 and 8 years. I moved to Madison just over 17 years ago. I'm in the field of solar energy, work as a Director of Operations for a local solar company. And that's about it.
Thank you, Elliot. Janet, you're on. I think you're
Mute.
muted.
I muted myself, yes. Hi, my name is Janet Peckinpah. I am a realtor with Sotheby's and had just transferred to Madison. I moved to Madison about a year ago. I came from Essex. Most recently, I was in Essex for 14 years. And the last 9, I was chair of economic development in Essex. I really love giving back. For 30 years, I was on television. Any of you who grew up around here probably remember me when you were kids. I've been off the air for quite a while, but I was a reporter and anchor for 3 of the 4 stations. So you might have seen me on one of those. I moved to Madison because my stepdaughters and their families are here. And Shauna, I think you know my son-in-law, my stepson-in-law, David Rosenthal. We've
I did not. Yes, I know David well. And I think you know my father-in-law who has passed away, Hank Yagi. Did you know Hank?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know he had passed.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. So, oh, that's wonderful. So I feel like I don't really know any of you, but I told David, I said, oh my gosh. And David said, oh yeah, tell Shauna. I said, hi. So I'm really excited to be here. And of course, Elliot, I know Maria. So it's wonderful to meet you in person. And John and I kind of go way back. So it's great to see you. Really excited to be here. I moved, as I said, just about 1 year ago from Essex to be closer to my stepkids and their families. And I wanted to volunteer my time. And basically I applied, and I mean, this happened very quickly. So I'm very excited to be here. Hope that I can contribute in any way. And I've got a lot of learning to do. So thanks for bearing with me.
Thank you, Janet. John Duza, our new full member.
Hi, Carol. Sure. John Duza. I volunteered a couple of months ago and joined as an alternate and got promoted. So I appreciate that. My wife and I moved to Madison in 2018. We have 2 teenagers. Interested in planning and zoning because of an issue that affected our neighborhood a couple of years ago. And instead of just getting upset about it, I thought it'd be good to get involved in solving future issues. So it's been good so far. I did grow up in Guilford and really wanted to get out of town, which I did, but of course ended up back here, and so far so good. So it's been a good experience so far, so I'm looking forward to continuing.
Thank you. Okay, next, Bob O'Connor, you're up.
Okay, I can go on for a half hour, but I won't.
Lightning round.
I'm a native of Connecticut. I'm a Greenwich High School graduate, and I've been in Madison for eight years. And this is because 9 years ago, I went to my high school reunion and I ran into my prom date, whom I hadn't seen in 50 years. And we are now a married couple, and we're doing much better than we were when we were 18. We met in Latin 4, which is a measure of both of our nerdinesses. My day job is that I'm a program director at the National Science Foundation in Alexandria, Virginia, but obviously I work remotely. Before, I've been there for 20 years. My program is in the social science directorate. It's decision, risk, and management sciences. So it's very relevant to the type of work we do. Before that, I was a political science professor at Penn State, teaching, among other courses, a graduate course in American local government and administration. So I danced around, but I know nothing about here and what's going on, and I'm delighted to learn.
Thank you. Okay, Michael. Yeah, I think you're muted still.
There we go. Hi, I'm Michael Bugda. My wife and Jeannie and I moved here in 2018, at the end of 2018. The way it worked out was my wife has family down here, 2 sisters, as a matter of fact, and one of them had found the perfect home for us. It was right next door to where she is. And we did everything we could to sell our house and move here in all of 30 days. And we managed to pull that off. But our house is at the end of, near the end of Neck Road, across from where the Mercy Center used to be, or is still, I guess. And we've enjoyed our time here very much. We're still exploring our way around. The pandemic kind of held us back quite a bit, but now we're starting to spread our wings again. I grew up in Islip, New York. I went there. My dad was a teacher in East Islip. He was an art teacher, but my calling was engineering. I went to an engineering school in Long Island. I joined a company that was into technology, electronics for aircraft and spacecraft. I got in with the space shuttle program, and I was all over the United States installing systems for NASA, either in California, New Mexico, or Florida. That was a lot of fun. And then I happened to meet my future wife on a blind date set up by my parents. She was up here in Boston, where she had been met my parents at Faneuil Hall in Boston. I moved up here and I worked for various companies, one of which got me into semiconductors, traveled the world, and had a great time. And then I retired when we found the perfect house, and we moved here. And that's pretty much it. I have an engineering degree. I have a master's also in an MBA from Stetson University in Florida, the Cornell of the South, as they call it. And I'm enjoying myself. I think my engineering skills might be applicable here, and I might be able to bring that aspect to the team as an alternate member. And thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. I think I would like to go ahead and seat our 2 alternates for this evening. We have two vacancies and 2 absentees. So Bob O'Connor and Michael Bugda, you'll be able to vote with us tonight, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Great. So welcome, everyone. And welcome to John Guskowski. Maybe you'd like to give yourself a quick introduction as well, and we'll move to our next agenda item, which is the Plan of Conservation and Development update.
I'll merely quote Dr. Ebel by saying the details of my life are quite inconsequential. Although I am happy to see Janet here. I am the planner in Essex as well, and work closely with her on some economic development stuff, and she will be an asset to your commission. So since I have the floor, then, unless Aaron wants to talk about Fairfield Days.
I'm sorry, I skipped you, Aaron. Maybe you'd like to give a quick.
You'll hear plenty from me as we move forward.
We'll get to know you very well.
I will. John, you could take the floor, and I'll give a brief introduction so everybody knows who to bother over at town campus when you need something.
Okay. So we are in the process, in the early phases. So I should back up a little bit for the folks that do not know who I am. I am a planning consultant. I'm a town planner by trade and by training, work with a number of small communities, have my own consulting company where we provide town planning and zoning services for a number of communities, as well as doing special studies and writing master plans. So my firm, Tyche Planning and Policy Group, was hired a couple of months ago to work with the town of Madison to update your plan of conservation and development. For those who are not familiar with that, this is a 10-year cycle master plan developed and adopted by the Planning Commission. You guys are a joint planning and zoning commission, but you're doing this project under your planning function to basically identify a whole variety of land use goals and visions for the community to basically chart a course for growth, for conservation, for development over the next 10 years. And we are in the very early stages of developing this plan. And one of the first things we did was took a look at your previous plan, which I believe was passed in 2014. I'm sorry, 2014. So we're a little 8.5 years or so into it. To take a look at sort of what some of the goals established under that plan were, and whether or not the town had made any progress towards achieving those goals or toward implementing those recommendations. Aaron put together an exhaustive and colorful spreadsheet, which was distributed around. Hopefully people got a chance to look at that. But I think, I would think it's even to veterans of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I imagine that spreadsheet was a bit overwhelming, and then to the new folks, totally incomprehensible. So I think it's not a big deal to if we don't make a bunch of progress on that tonight. And I have a suggestion on how we might do that a little bit later. But the other thing that we were going to talk about, and I presented in a separate Word document, is a little bit about the state plan of conservation and development, which is a 5-year cycle plan. And ideally, the goals of the local plans should somewhat harmonize with the overall state goals. And the state goals are expressed as growth management principles, and there are 6 of those. And then I presented a couple of alternative outlines. And we talked about this a little bit, that there is no single model for what a local plan of conservation and development needs to look like. Some towns do them very subject oriented, which was one of the examples I gave. We talk about housing. What's the current situation? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? We look at transportation. Where are we? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? Infrastructure, economic development, open space conservation, recreation, and kind of breaks it down that way, which I think is relatively simple, straightforward, pretty easy to understand, subject based. Other communities have started to undertake a more of a thematic sort of vision approach, where they sort of look at big themes like vitality and sustainability and connectivity and resilience, and those are sort of these cross-cutting themes that there's a little bit of transportation, a little bit of housing, a little bit of open space in something like sustainability or something like resilience. So it's just sort of a different way of looking at the same ideas. And so, I think ideally we're going to talk a little bit about that and people's sort of level of comfort of one of these approaches resonated. But again, it's perfectly fine to sort of take a breather and just talk a little bit. And I would, with your permission, Madam Chair, to get some of the other members, John and Elliot and Shauna, did talk a little bit about a couple of months ago things that were important to them about Madison or goals that they had. And so if you wanted to take a little time to hear from the new members about, broadly speaking, what are some hopes, things that make Madison, things that people are concerned about, so we can kind of round out that part of the discussion. But it's important to make sure that everyone is a little bit more up to speed before we sort of plow ahead with big decisions.
Sure. Do our new members feel ready to kind of highlight what priorities you might have for Madison at this point? Janet?
I really
Yeah,
haven't given it
I
much
would-
thought
oh,
myself.
Sorry,
We are putting you on the spot.
sorry,
without-
Michael.
Yeah. Go ahead, Janet.
I really haven't given it much thought. But if I had an interest, it would be some infrastructure items. That's where my personal focus is, but it's not necessarily a priority.
What do you mean by infrastructure?
Power lines, utility lines, telecommunications, Wi-Fi, things of that nature.
So improvements, faster
Yeah,
speeds, more
But
reliable.
that's more of a personal interest than it is a
No, it's
priority.
important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Janet?
One thing that I think, and again, coming from an even smaller community than Madison most recently, that we forget is when things are running well in a town, like they seem to be in Madison, the real estate in downtown is, vibrant and seems full, and everything's going well, and people are shopping and they're eating and they're, doing all these things in town. I think one thing we forget is to look ahead to the future, and how can we keep that happening as we look ahead? I mean, are there things that we need to do to keep that vibrancy in our town so that people will continue to use town the way they are now? It's successful now, but how can we make sure that the next generation that moves in will find it as, vibrant as it is now? And is that, to me, it's getting more people to live in town and, things like that.
Thanks. Bob?
Yeah, my concern is very much, Janet, to continue on your theme, keeping a vibrant town, but also address the matter of affordable housing. There's ways you can do affordable housing that will be horrible, that will have people feeling threatened, that will be a zoo that won't work. There's ways to do it that can be effective, that people will say, hey, this is to the benefit of all of us. It's fair, it makes sense. We're not going to be, the goal is not to bring drug dealers from Bridgeport downtown. And so, how do we keep a vibrant town with addressing affordable housing needs? I don't have the easy answer, by the way. If I did, or any answer I did, I would share it. But unfortunately, no, I do not.
Thanks for those thoughts.
Okay.
have a Question for John.
Sure.
Along those lines of vibrancy, I read the reports for Essex and Old Saybrook, and one thing that stands out in those reports is that the population projection is for fewer residents over time. What's the projection for Madison? Is that something that you put together or somebody else?
We have some of those. You did some of those for the affordable housing plan, Aaron. I don't know if you have those somewhat handy-ish.
I can grab those.
And even the census shows that there's a decrease in population from 2010.
And I think all of the sort of Central Coast and Middlesex County communities are largely in that same boat, where we're both aging and losing young people, and are projected to have relatively significant decreases in our school age and young adult populations. And I think very few communities of this type are projected to see any significant growth. It's mostly flat or sort of a 10-year, maybe 5% decrease sort of thing. But Aaron is feverishly looking at the very specifics. But the Connecticut State Data Center did projections, I don't want to say about 7 years back or so, which are the best available, but you sort of have to take them with a grain of salt because all kinds of crazy things happen, as soon as you complete a data projection. Like in this case, we had a massive 2-year pandemic that really shook up way people made decisions about where to live. And so, data projections are not magic, nor are they locked in destiny. They're just that. They're just projections.
Yeah, I had heard there was a rather large influx of people into Madison area during the pandemic. Is that not the case?
Yeah.
I can speak
Go
to
ahead,
that.
From the realtor's perspective, yes.
So I could certainly say there is, but here's what's happening, and I think we need to be cognizant of this. So my son and his wife and new baby have moved back to the United States from Europe, and there is no, so his half sisters live in Madison with their families. There's no way he can afford to buy his first home in Madison. I mean, it's just totally unaffordable. So, and he's 34. So you're looking at that generation. So our influx of people that came, during the 20 and 21 were basically people from New York, a lot of New Yorkers, second homes, who had a lot, who were in their 50s, 60s, who had a lot of money. So aging, I think, is a real concern for Madison. Keeping the schools filled with younger people is going to be really difficult in the coming years, because we've just almost priced ourselves out of, that first and second home buyers cannot come here. They just, they can't afford it. There's nothing for them.
The other interesting trend that we're seeing is gradual shrinking of household sizes, and the prevalence of 1 and 2 person households. And in many communities, I think Madison not quite as much as a lot of the surrounding towns, but household sizes are getting smaller. It's now down to about 2.5, maybe a little bit less, median household size. And somewhere between 50 and 65% of our households are either 1 or 2 person. And just in hearing, some of the new members talking about, where you're at and moving to Madison, we have a lot of 1 and 2 person households, even on this commission. And very often, not to make anybody feel bad about it or anything, but are very often in 3, 4, 5 bedroom houses. And so we do have that mismatch between household sizes and house sizes.
Yeah, I just want to introduce Giselle McDowell, who's just joined us. Hi, Giselle.
Hi, I apologize.
No worries, but I have seated some of our new alternates in your place. So,
Okay.
but I think we're just going to mostly have discussions tonight anyway, so it's a good night.
Very good.
So I think we're going to talk a little bit about the implementation of the previous planned recommendations. I would suggest that this is probably not the right time and venue to do that. What I would suggest, and Aaron, tell me if this is crazy, what I would propose to do is, again, this is a list of scrolling, about 180. A few, maybe a little bit fewer, because there's some blank lines and headers in there. Maybe let's call it 140 to 150 goals and recommendations. I would be willing to convert this to basically a survey monkey, an online survey. If the commission would sort of commit to sort of going through, and what I would do is put the goals or the recommendation in a column and sort of say, this is still relevant, still important, something that should be carried through. This is something that's largely, something of the past, something we've accomplished or is no longer relevant. And then, and maybe a comment column or a third category, like don't know enough about it or something like that. And just ask you to basically take a poll of so we can begin to identify which of these recommendations are sort of still relevant, still important. And use that as a jumping off point, because it's going to be awfully challenging, I think, to sort through 140 something items with, the 10 of you and several people, this being your first meeting. That's I think maybe one way we can make some progress on that one.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so Aaron, perhaps you and I can sort of work on structuring the format of it, but I can pull something together.
And I guess determining the relevance, if there are goals or initiatives that are in progress or are ongoing, do they need to continue to be in this table, called out as individual tasks, and maybe more just referred to as general policy or continuing steps? And that might be a way of eliminating and consolidating this list, if we're going to have these tasks at the end of our new plan.
And I think a worthwhile question to the commissioners as you're going through this is kind of get the sense of, is this way too much? You know, and we don't need to be bound by this sort of going forward. Obviously, these were the goals that are still current to your commission. But if this approach, you know, if this immense laundry list is not the approach you want to a plan going forward, if you want something a little bit more streamlined, a little bit simpler, guided more by vision than a checklist, that's something to consider as you're going through.
John, can I ask you, is it common for a plan of conservation and development to have so many goals that are not followed through on within a decade? I mean, there's a lot of red on that spreadsheet.
Well, yeah. Okay. And I don't want to cast aspersions about the firm that helped you develop the last one, but there's a lot of plans that look like this in Connecticut that were largely done by the same company, who tends to, I think, err on the side of, we want to put in all of the ideas. You know, anything that someone mentions as important during a public hearing or a discussion ends up in the plan. And the thing that this lacks, and I don't know if people are looking at their spreadsheet, I can share my screen if you want to sort of take a look at it. But what, well, you know, I'll just do this quickly. Can you see that?
Not yet. Yes.
Okay. The thing that this lacks, and you know, Aaron and I pulled this from the plan itself, just kind of concatenating things. It lacks trackability. I think a good plan, and I would hope that our plan that we're going to develop right now not only has a column A of what needs to be done, but then a column B of who needs to be responsible for this. You know, who is primarily the entity that you know you can poke 2 years down the road and say, hey, what have you done about this? And you know, and it's not the Planning and Zoning Commission for a lot of things. You know, it's Parks and Rec, and it's the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and the, you know, and then you know, another column for other entities that should be supporting. And then ideally, you know, something about how important this is. Is this something we need to get on in the first, you know, year or two? Is this something that is we start and is ongoing? Or this is something that, you know, will need a whole lot of money or resources. So, you know, a little bit more detail so that it is a little bit more easily trackable. You know,
it does do that.
Oh, does it?
In the actual plan, but
Okay,
this
there is some
particular
implementation. Yeah.
table eliminated those columns.
Okay.
Just
I want to add, though, Aaron, that also some of the implementation is done by many groups. And I think often what happens in that case is that everybody thinks everyone else is doing it, maybe.
well, also consider that in the past, in the 2000 plan, there was a committee, what were they called? The implementation committee, essentially, who was established to keep the town on task to follow this plan. And that did happen after the 2000 POCD. And I think that may have been the intention after the 2013, but that never came to fruition. And that was the Town Plan Advisory Committee. And sort of this group that would poke everybody, you know, to get get things done. And I don't know if that's a common theme. I mean, from the municipalities that I have worked in, I have not seen committees in that sense formed after the adoption of a POCD. Typically, it's been through, kind of facilitated through the planning department trying to reach out and implement those goals. But that's something to consider and may have guided the format of this because it was the same consultant who did the 2000 plan in 2013. And they're very similar to each other. And so maybe this was just meant to be that easy kind of checklist to guide this committee.
So yeah, I didn't mean to inappropriately malign a lack of implementation detail, but yeah, and so it could be that the committee to implement was not as active or effective. It could be that it is way too many things. If everything has a priority one, then that also means nothing has a priority one.
Right.
But yeah, so these are it's not uncommon for there to be a whole bunch of things to do. But having some thought about how are we actually going to do these things and what can people actually focus on given their bandwidth, given the fact that probably half or more of the people that are working on this are like you, volunteers. We need to moderate expectations a little bit.
Is there any kind of regular review and assessment of these projects to see if they still make sense or if they need to be modified or killed off?
That's what we're going to do now. So hopefully as we, and John's suggestion of maybe putting these into a survey format where you can either agree that this is still relevant, think we should keep it in, and that might help better get a overall consensus from the commission. And we can also, another thought, John, is put this on the back burner and look at our outline. And then as we're tackling our individual subject matter, now we're going to pull back and refer to our implementation table and see where do these fit in and are they, what section and do we really still feel that we need to include?
Yeah, that's right, and to take it in bite-sized pieces. I think that's a good idea.
Well, what about have some kind of a checklist? Like does it meet statewide goals or guidelines or some other criterion that we might want to apply to it? Does that make sense in any context?
So yes, we do have to have or demonstrate that our plan is consistent with state goals. I think they're fairly broad that I don't think we're going to have a challenge doing that. But we should relate these tasks specifically to the needs of our community.
Right.
This plan is used as a basis for one of the most important is for land use guiding the regulatory process and the zoning regulations, as well as funding opportunities. So some things you want to look back and be able to refer to our plan for this overall guiding document. And yeah, I think right now we're a little overly specific in our task.
Janet, I think you need to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Aaron and John, is this committee still in place?
No, it was not established for the 2013. It was an idea, and that was before my time, and many of our times, I think. So I can't speak to why that didn't happen. But no, there was not a committee formed this round.
And do you mind just reminding me how we interact with the other stakeholders in the town on this plan, seeing as many of the things that we are going to be deciding are actually going to end up in their laps to either fund or do?
So again, this is a process that has no specific step by step or model. So it's up to the commission, working with Aaron and myself, helping you to do whatever type of outreach you think is appropriate. And I would suggest, like, for instance, if we are taking sort of the more subject-based approach, looking at housing, transportation, and economic development and things like that, when we talk about those things, again, I would say primarily in this forum, your planning meetings, to invite members of the public, stakeholders, when we're talking about conservation, call in the land trust, call in the conservation commission, and to get their input about things that they're working on, things that are important to them, things they want us to look out for. And similarly with economic development, we would want to talk to some of the business owners and major employers in town, and so on. But this is your process. I'm here to sort of help facilitate it and kind of bring the ideas into a document, but you can have as much public outreach as you feel is appropriate.
John, in your survey, would you want to have us vote on which outline we like better?
Sure. Like to
And
do
then
that?
we can maybe take it from there too, as Aaron suggested, that would inform what topics in the spreadsheet are still relevant, or prioritize them even.
Sure.
I think breaking them down a little bit into section by section and focus on one section at a time would be greatly beneficial also, instead of 140 lines of information. But one of the items I scrolled through, and I actually stopped on this twice regarding the enhancement of North Madison. And 2 to 3 items are in red, and we actually did have a proposed zone change up in that area that got very well attended, and people were very much against expanding anything in that North Madison shopping district or something, I think it was called.
The rural shopping district. Yeah.
Rural shopping, yeah. And I mean, I almost feel like some of that, a couple of those shouldn't be read, because we did try to do something with that, and the residents were clear that they didn't want any changes up there.
So I think, to speak to that a little bit, Elliot, it could have been a response to a specific proposal, but I feel that we do need to look at amenities and opportunities for our residents, as we do concentrate all of our commercial area to the south, along the Post Road corridor. However, we have quite a bit of residents in this whole northern portion of town, and often you might hear simple complaints like, I can't get a cup of coffee without having to drive 20 minutes to a coffee shop. So I think that, in my opinion, just my personal opinion, that there may be opportunities to look at this a little further, more from a general planning standpoint, not necessarily with proposal, but just to receive feedback and do some of that outreach to find out what are some of the needs of our residents in North Madison, and then how can we address those, whether it's through updating the regulations to allow different uses, or some other type of initiative to try and accommodate. We looked at this from EV chargers and other infrastructure, things that we can provide without having to really isolate just to residential uses in our northern portion of town. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to dismiss it right away, because in my mind, there are areas of town that I think we really should look at a little more, see what can we provide.
I also think in the previous POCD, there was too much emphasis on the Madison Center. It got a whole section of its own, and I think we might want to rethink that, possibly.
I mean, the only thing with that is that seems to be what everybody wants to preserve also, is the downtown Madison Center.
Mhm.
So it is pretty important to a lot of people.
And transit-oriented development is a large focus these days as well. And so trying to have that balance of that concentration in our small center area versus other opportunities to spread out. And other opportunities for mass transit and small.
I think it will probably find itself popping up. I mean, I think you won't need to devote a full sort of chapter focus on it like you had in the last time. But I think without question, what we're hearing, it will pop up a lot. You know, in your economic development section, in your transportation and infrastructure section, in your community facilities and resources section, like these, it will pop up over and over. But I think that's to be expected because it is, you know.
John,
But,
what's this it that would pop up again?
I'm sorry, a focus on Madison Center.
The
Okay.
downtown area.
What do people call it? Do you call it Madison Center? Do you call it downtown?
Call it many things.
Mhm.
That's part of the
Downtown
confusion, I think.
Village District.
It's the downtown village district. It's Madison Center. It's downtown. It's, yeah. I mean, we have historic district within it too. I think that language can be cleaned up and made more consistent. And looking ahead, maybe Aaron, to zoning regulation upgrades and modifications and revisions. I find it's a little confusing looking at all the regulations to see which section of downtown I'm actually, is relevant. So, but as you say, John, I think it will sort of unfold itself as we go along. And by the way, all the new people that if you don't have it yet, we will be giving you the plan of conservation and development, right? I think it's available online, but you have to get it in PDF
Pieces.
chunks by section.
Right. So Carol and I, to our new members, I know you were just sworn in either early this week or late last week.
Today.
Haven't had the opportunity to bring you in for your one-on-one or 101 land use.
Onboarding.
Yeah, onboarding. And so that's something that we're hoping that we can connect with you in the next week so that we can set up some time and introduce you to what we do, both in the office and what the commission's role is, both in your planning capacity and then also wearing your zoning. This is a nice opportunity in this meeting where this is not a regulatory meeting, which is unusual for us for the last year or so, I should say. So it really is nice to put that planning hat on and move forward on this update. I guess my only question, and John, not to step on your toes, but was if anybody had any initial thoughts on the outline. Did anybody look at one and it really stood out and said, "Oh, I like this is the way I want to go," or do you?
Or having looked like John Duza, having looked at some of the other examples of plans of conservation and development, if something grabbed you and like, "Ooh, we got to do something like that."
My blink reaction was leaning toward the first example, John. And I think I joked with Aaron that the second one was a little bit too kumbaya for me.
Glass half full.
I mean, we can incorporate them somehow, but
Yeah, it's fine for Essex. Essex can have it.
I agree, Carol. I think I'm just maybe a little concrete for the second one. It just seems like the first one is sort of follows how my brain works a little bit more. And I just see with the second one, although I like those themes, and I sort of wonder if we could incorporate them into each of the more concrete headings of the first group. But I just see that there would be a lot of overlap, so inclusive and welcoming, you can imagine that could be open space and economic development and, community. I mean, I just don't understand how you really split up all the different sort of, again, very concrete parts of this into the more kumbaya headings of the second one. but I like those as things to consider when thinking about how we are going to plan and develop Madison. I think those are really, really interesting and engaging things to be contemplating as we're thinking about where Madison should go.
I would, Aaron, I think you probably sent a chapter or two from the Old Saybrook plan.
Yeah.
So
well, not to our newest. So yes, I'll get you all caught
okay,
up.
so that might be, maybe we can send that around again. That's Old Saybrook is using a slightly kind of a hybrid model there, where they are going very subject based, and we're the Old Saybrook has had this weird approach where they updated their plan over 20 years, and they basically took 20 topics and updated each one once a year for 20 years. And so their housing chapter was something like 19 years old when we finally got to it, which was a huge mess. So we're actually trying to update all the chapters like quickly. But what we did there is they're very subject-based: housing, transportation, infrastructure, open space, environmental resilience. But for each of those topics, we started incorporating sort of 4 themes, like, connected and sustainable and resilient and vibrant, and then talked about how transportation interacts with those themes. So maybe we could reshare the Old Saybrook one, a couple of those chapters, so we can get a sense of that. But it does maintain, I think, that the very sort of left brain organization of, here's the topic. This is what we're talking about. We can think about transportation, whether it's roads or rail or sidewalks or bike, but then, how do those fit our more kumbaya areas within those chapters? So that might be a way to hybridize it, but yeah. Anyway.
Good idea. I'll get that out.
I like the matrix at the end of the first sample. So the first one was more clear, and that matrix was a nice addition too.
John, do you feel like you have enough information from this session for next steps and moving along?
Definitely. So we'll put in just sort of a simple question about layout and outlines, and then we'll break down the topics. Actually, Aaron, I think it might be easier to sort of resort them by the chapter they were in, just to kind of break them up anyway. We'll talk about laying that out. So the goal will be to get you a survey to complete probably in the next 2 weeks, so we can get that compiled before the next meeting.
Great, sounds good.
That works.
Okay.
Any other questions or thoughts? Thank you, John.
Thank you. Good to see everyone. And we'll good luck with the rest of your agenda.
Thanks a lot.
We'll talk soon.
Have a good evening. So next on our agenda is a discussion about the Madison accessory apartment regulations and whether we should opt out of the state PA 21-29 accessory apartment provisions. Aaron, I guess this is all you.
So at our last meeting, I provided the commission with a memo and explained a little bit where we are. In July of 2021, Public Act 2129, and this is really for a recap, but also for our new commissioners, was a legislative action that really affected land use. And I think you probably recall from a lot of the news stories and things of the state imposing additional standards on municipalities with respect. A lot of this was led by the Desegregate Connecticut movement, who drafted a lot of these proposals before legislative Hartford, excuse me. So one of the laws that came out of Public Act 2129 was regarding accessory apartments, accessory dwelling units. And basically, it was an amendment to the Connecticut General Statutes, Section 8-2, which is the zoning enabling statutes. Basically making as of right accessory apartments wherever a single family dwelling may be. And providing additional standards, and I did provide you with that chart. It's a comparison basically, and I can provide you ahead of our hearing. So this is not our hearing. This was just a little bit more of a follow-up to answer some questions and provide you with some information ahead of a public hearing at our next meeting. Let me get my memo out here so I can share a little bit more. Yeah. I apologize. Okay. So there are regulations and limitations. A lot of municipalities in the state do not have accessory dwelling regulations. Madison does, and we've had them for quite some time, I believe since the 1980s. And we have specific standards. We do allow as of right accessory dwelling units, which is either through a zoning permit process or a site plan review process with the Planning and Zoning Commission. A site plan review application before you is essentially an administrative approval, meaning that if the development complies with the zoning regulations, the commission shall approve it. Further goes, the statutes further state that your failure to act within 65 days of receipt of this application is an automatic approval. So it really is truly an administrative, you check the boxes, you get your approval. It's different than a special permit or a special exception review where the commission can apply some level of discretion to that process. There is no mandatory public hearing with an administrative approval, although it is optional to the commission to hold public hearings. So the laws have changed. They became effective January 1st, 2022. What's interesting about the law when it was adopted or signed in was that there was a caveat that if municipalities wanted to opt out of the language of the statute, they could do so by January 1st, 2023, with 2/3 vote of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that vote being ratified by 2/3 vote of the legislative body, being the Board of Selectmen. And so as we're nearing the end of 2022, we're discussing this and whether or not the commission feels it appropriate to opt out of the language of the statute. If we fail to opt out of the language, basically we have four options here. We could do nothing to our current zoning regulations. What I guess is important to note is that our current regulations do not meet the state statute. So we're not in compliance right now with what the new law is. So here are our options. We do nothing. And as of January 1st, 2023, our current local regulations become null and void, and we have to follow the state statutes that the new law governs. The second option is we could amend our current zoning regulations to be in compliance with the state law and meet all the standards. Or we could opt out of adopting the state law and maintain our existing regulations as we have them. And our last option would be we could opt out of the state law and modify our regulations. Use this as an opportunity to refresh, see what works, what doesn't. Maybe there are some aspects of the state regulations that we want to include. Maybe there are some reasons why our language is written as is in our zoning code, and we want to preserve that. So that's kind of what we're gonna work through our existing regulations versus what the state law is proposing, and make that determination of what we should do. In order to do that, we had to initiate the public hearing process for opting out in a timely fashion so that the commission could take action and then allow for the Board of Selectmen to ratify that decision if you do choose to opt out before the end of the year. So that's why our timing is such, holding a public hearing at your next meeting. And I will have, I wanted to just kind of give you a basic chart explaining the differences and kind of go through that with you if you'd like today. I will, on the record at the public hearing, I will give you a PowerPoint presentation with the important bullets that you need to know. Really, the decision, there's no, if you choose to opt out of the regulations, there is not a mandatory amendment. We don't necessarily have to initiate changes to our regulations currently. How I've been looking at our current zoning code, it's been a very long time since we've had a comprehensive review of our zoning code and our subdivision code. It's something that I feel needs to be done in town. However, it's best, in my opinion, to hold off on that comprehensive review until we have an opportunity to go through our plan of conservation and development, because we may find that some of our goals change and we may need to change our regulations to help implement those goals. So we go through our planning process over the next year, and then hopefully in the following year, we can begin to hire a consultant to assist us in that review of our zoning regulations to make changes. It's not to say we can't change one section as we go. If we find that we really do want to either lax some of our regulations or change and make them a little more restrictive. Currently, our regulations are more restrictive than the state regulations. And I can highlight that a little bit. One is this we have to designate locations, excuse me, areas where accessory apartments are allowed. They need to be allowed in the same fashion that a single family dwelling is allowed, with no more restrictive review on that, no greater setbacks, no height limitations, things of that nature. In that case, I went through our zoning regulations. In our residential zones, we do comply with that. When we get into some of our commercial zones, we treat single family and multiple dwelling units differently. The multiple dwelling units are treated a little bit more like a commercial use, requiring special exception process. As we said earlier, special exception is not an as of right use. So we're requiring a little more stringent application process, including public hearings. And so that's one of our differences. Yes, Michael.
Just a fundamentally probably stupid question from a newbie. When we say an accessory apartment, we mean like an in-law or au pair?
Exactly. So
Okay.
an accessory is just as an accessory apartment is a smaller dwelling unit containing what you need to live independently. It would have a bedroom, it would have a full bathroom, and it would
Okay.
have it could be attached to our current regulations allow attached accessory apartments or apartments in detached accessory structures.
Okay.
And that's consistent with the state law. However, we have more restrictive accessory structure requirements than what would be considered consistent with single family dwellings. The one item that really stood out in my mind is except we do not allow in our zoning code accessory structures within the front yard. So any accessory building needs to be behind the front yard, behind the house, or at least behind the front wall of the house. It cannot be between the primary dwelling and the road. So,
In all cases, right? There's no exceptions to what you're saying.
right, in the zoning regulations, that's the way, the only relief valve to that regulation is the zoning board of appeals. Just as in any other case, when someone cannot comply with a setback or another zoning regulation, they have the ability to apply to the zoning board of appeals for a variance. But that's not consistent with the new state law. So that's something that I think that we're going to have to talk through and understand what was the reasoning for having our accessory structures step back, and how does that change the physical appearance of our residential roads, and is that something that the commission is comfortable relaxing that requirement, or is that something that has worked and you feel strongly that we should maintain that consistency with the accessory structure? That may be a reason why we choose to opt out, to maintain that accessory structure regulation. Because if you were building a new accessory structure with an accessory apartment, the new law would say it shouldn't be any more restrictive than what you allow for a single family dwelling. And ours clearly is in that case, and in the case of a detached structure.
But loosening that restriction would also open it up to all accessory structures, whether it's a shed,
change the accessory structure regulation either to exempt accessory structures with, that's a challenging, because a lot of times an accessory structure is built and then it could be down the road converted to a dwelling unit within that. But if it is a new construction, which we don't have a limitation, that the house has to exist for so many years, or the building has to exist for so many years before you can add an apartment to it. Our regulations allow for new construction. You can build a new single family house with an accessory apartment at the same time, as long as you meet our criteria. One of the other limiting factors that we have is a minimum is the square footage of the dwelling unit, the accessory dwelling unit. The new law indicates that an accessory apartment could have no less than 30% of the floor area of the principal dwelling on the property, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. Our current code, we have a minimum of 400 square feet and a maximum of 800 square feet. So we do not allow up to that 1,000. And that may be something that we wish to address. I've in other municipalities where I've worked, they've allowed a greater square footage for apartments, and I think that's, that's fairly, in my opinion, looking at that floor area versus other limiting factors of lot area or overall floor area, we may be able to expand that accessory apartment square footage while still maintaining the same goals that we had in the underlying zone for setbacks and lot coverage. Height, landscaping, architectural standards cannot exceed what we require for a single family house. We don't have a design review process for a single family house. We do, however, have a design review process for an accessory apartment that includes exterior facade change. And so that requires a site plan approval with the commission rather than an administrative staff approval. And that also requires a referral to our advisory committee on community appearance, fondly known as ACCA. If any of you, our new members have heard of this group, it is a committee that the Planning and Zoning Commission appoints, consisting of architects, landscape architects, other design professionals, and also members of the public at large. And they review proposals, facade improvements, landscape improvements, make recommendations. They're an advisory committee to you. And we do, our current regulations do require that if a resident was looking to put an accessory apartment on that required exterior facade changes, they go through that design process. I'm not sure that's something that you'd like to continue or not. It does indeed put additional time constraints, and it could be considered to be burdensome for the property owner. And then lastly, there are other requirements in the statute. We cannot require an interior passageway between the two units. You cannot require an extra exterior door to be added, except as required by fire code. We can't require more than one parking space for an apartment. And we can't require a familial relationship between the residents of the principal dwelling or the accessory. So that term in-law apartment, there you can't require that relationship in your regulations any longer. We can't require a minimum age for occupants of apartments, and we can't require separate billing for utilities or the need for periodic permit renewals. And that's where there are a few instances here that we are not consistent with the proposed state law. One, our current regulations do require 3 parking spaces when you are creating an accessory apartment, which wouldn't necessarily be a problem in a newer home where you may have a 2-car garage and creating 1 additional outside parking space for an apartment. But in some of our older homes, which we do have, and many of our houses were built in the 60s and they only have 1-car garage. Now we're requiring an additional burden of adding 2 parking spaces to create this accessory apartment. That is not consistent with state law. The second is the annual renewal requirement. We do require annual affidavits to be submitted, notarized affidavits from the property owner, annually confirming that they are in compliance with the accessory apartment regulations. That is not only burdensome on the property owners, but it is also burdensome on the land use staff as well. So that is one I would not mind eliminating from our regulations. And that can easily be done. However, we need to look at the rest of our requirements as well. And then lastly, the other thought is and you may have heard this, the worry that the local land use, this home rule where municipalities can create their own land use, their own zoning regulations, as long as they're consistent with the enabling language in the statutes. And this specific language is essentially removing the local authorities' right to change your regulation over time. So if you do not opt out of the regulations, you have adopted the statutes that govern accessory apartments. And should those statutes change in the future, you are subject to whatever those regulations, however they're amended. So the opportunity to opt out, and some towns may be doing this. The opportunity to opt out allows you to, you can opt out and adopt every one of the changes that are recommended or that are in the new law. However, that preserves your ability, should something change in the future in the law in Hartford, you still have the ability to determine if you want to adopt that regulation. So that is something to consider. This is a little unusual. I don't recall any statutory changes that provide municipalities with the opportunity to opt out of them. In our Council of Governments here in South Central Council of Governments, and I will provide, I'm gathering some of that information. I have a draft document from SCROG. Most of the municipalities in our Council of Governments have decided to opt out of the regulations for one reason or another. In preparation for our next meeting, I will provide you with the number of registered accessory apartments that we have. Again, I will do a slideshow presentation, answer any questions you might have, also provide you with a legal opinion, as far as your options, if that's of interest to you as well. So that's a mouthful. I know the regulations are technical and can seem overwhelming. You could look at this on a very surface level and just, in deciding, do we want to maintain control of our regulation or do we want to adopt the state language? Or we could look at this more thorough and put in any, if you are deciding to opt out, you put specific reasons. You do have to state your reasons for opting out. There was a question at our last meeting that said, well, who's going to look at our reasons and tell us if that's good enough? I don't know. Nobody's going to tell you that your reason isn't good enough. You're following the process. This was, I really do think that this was a compromise in part, with this bill. This was a way to get buy-in for some changes to our statutes, make them more inclusive. And while still, being able to carry those votes, the desegregate bill had a lot more regulatory changes in the statutes. What was adopted, it was a much more watered down. This opportunity to give municipalities the time to say, no, we don't agree with this. This is a new concept, but there are quite a number of municipalities because of that opportunity. And I want to make sure that we get this chance and make sure that we're looking at it seriously because we won't get enough to do that. Any questions today ahead of the hearing? At the hearing, we'll allow for opportunity for the public to talk and to give opinions and things that maybe we'll hear things that work in our regulation, things that don't. Maybe we won't hear much feedback at all. But it is, the hearing is to follow the process in the statutes and to make sure we're checking all of the boxes in our consideration. And if you have questions ahead of time that you want to make sure I have for you at the meeting, please let me know so I can do my homework.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Giselle.
Yeah, so what happens when the law is in effect and we have current accessory or in-law apartments? How is that managed, or are they just grandfathered in and we start new?
So if we did not opt out and the new law took effect, is that what you're talking about, Giselle? Then the apartments that were approved, they may or may not be non-conforming. Some may be able to expand because the state statute is less restrictive than our local regulation. They would no longer have to submit annual affidavits. We can no longer require that. I don't believe we would be creating non-conformities. We would just have, I think, the opportunity for expansion of existing units. An easier process for permits also.
Erin, could you give us a quick update on what the town is doing regarding short-term rentals? And if we should be thinking about that in terms of the accessory apartments?
does allow this, the law does not prevent municipalities from regulating short-term rentals. So the accessory apartment statute would not prevent any future regulation of short-term rentals. Currently, we do not have short-term rental regulations, and that is what the Board of Selectmen are considering through an ordinance process, which I anticipate will have some more discussion at the end of November. I'll keep you updated as far as what, and let you know when we meet so that we can be part of it.
Aaron, just to be perfectly clear, so if we opt out by January 1st, we don't have to also make any changes to our statute by then. So if there are changes proposed, those can be considered and debated down the road. Is that right?
Right. We can kind of get a surface level understanding of what we like about our regulations, what we might want to explore changing, and then maybe see what other municipalities have going on as well. I think a lot, everybody's in the same boat at this particular time to see how they're going to address this. But no, there's not a requirement. We can easily say, as one of the reasons for opting out is that we're going to take the opportunity to review our current regulations and see how in our areas, especially some of our commercial areas, industrial areas, how we want to address it. Sorry,
I mean, I just don't see much downside to opting out then. I guess I'm not seeing much of a reason to opt in, except that it's just kind of done with, I guess. We just adopt the statute, but it feels like if we want to have, a thoughtful consideration of what we were doing with accessory apartments, then it seems like an easy decision, but I know we're not debating it now. I'm just.
Right. One last item that I did want to tell you, as we were talking about affordable housing earlier, the statute does not, it does say that no accessory apartment shall be required to be an affordable, designated, a deed restricted affordable unit. So, and that's something, for example, the town of Brantford, their current zoning regulations, if you're going to put in an accessory apartment, they require it to be deed restricted affordable, which many of them are. They're just that lowercase a. They don't count as the capital A affordable housing. And that's a way that Brantford has tried to slowly chip away at their 10% requirement. And that was one of the main reasons they decided, oh, we're not opting in, because we would lose that opportunity. And I can I'll provide you with feedback from the other communities in our COG and the reasons why they decided to opt out. And a couple who decided to opt in. Guilford, for example, is opting in, which in my having worked as the zoning enforcement officer in Guilford is a significant change to their current zoning, where they were allowed by special permit process.
So if we do opt out, we can opt back in at any time, or is there a process, procedure, or timeline that we could reconsider?
Right. So it wouldn't be opting back in. It would be a text amendment to your zoning regulations, which is within your ability as the zoning commission. You create your zoning regulations. It's a public hearing process. Draft an amendment to the regulations. We go through the public hearing process, make your referrals as required by the statutes, and then you take action on that. So that you just simply adopt new regulations
At any time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we could do that with any part of our regulation. Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks, Erin. So this will be on the agenda for the November 17th meeting.
Yes. And I'll go through, send our newer members a recap of what we have, make sure that everything's linked. Just general housekeeping, our agendas are posted online in the Agenda Center. on the town's website. And we have live links to all application documents on them. And we hold all the old applications. So if you wanted to look back at another meeting and see what information was provided to the commission or staff reports, you can easily click on those and read through them or download them. And so that worked very well for transparency and not having to have all the paper copies and mailing things to the commission. So that's our communication way of getting you all of our current information, and that's updated all the time, even the older agendas. So even if our new agenda isn't uploaded onto the website just yet, and as you'll see here in the format of our agenda, we always have a section of pending applications or projects or discussions, so you can see where it is in the process. And if that is carried over from a previous meeting, those documents will always be live and current. Any new information that comes in, Maria does scan those right in. So if you don't see our current agenda, head back to our last one and all that information is available to you. And I'll make sure that I get you information well ahead of our hearing so that you have an opportunity to prior to.
So that's a good segue, Erin, that there are now 5 items on our agenda that you've listed here, which are scheduled for the November 17th meeting. Did you want to talk about any of them?
Right. So under our pending list, this 1362 Boston Post Road, which is Salt Meadow Park, it's a town application for special exception to create a dog park at Salt Meadow. The Beach and Rec Director has requested that we continue, or that we table the public hearing as they won't be ready for the November 17th meeting. They were requested by ACA, to explore fencing options and landscape options and reconfiguring the layout of the dog park. And so Austin has been working hard to do that and to return to ACA. And so he did request that we reschedule the public hearing. At this point, I would recommend that the commission reschedule the hearing to the December 1st meeting. I know we're trying to preserve our first meeting of the month to plan conservation and development discussion and not really be doing any land use business at these meetings. But that is the 65 days to open the public hearing. So my thought is, at this point, I would schedule it for the December 1st meeting. If Austin provides and grants an extension to the commission ahead of the legal notice needing to be run, then at your next meeting, you could table further to the December 15th meeting, which would give him plenty of time. 2 more ACA meetings could be done. And that will also then preserve our first meeting of the month fall planning. I just do not physically have a letter of extension or consent from Austin at this time. And so you are bound to open the public hearing within 65 days. So at this point, we need to schedule it.
Okay,
We would need a motion for that.
a motion tonight for it
Yep, to table to the first.
to table. Okay, could I have a motion to table?
I'll move to table. Do you want
Thank you,
the
Fiona.
item? Yeah.
Second,
Go to the first.
Second,
Second.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, the next 2 are placeholders. We do have a PDD text amendment coming before the commission at the next hearing, or excuse me, at the next meeting, so that public hearing will open. Then we have the opt-out accessory apartment public hearing. And lastly, we have a site plan modification application for the General's residence, which is on the corner of East Fork and Boston Post Road, that many of you are intimately familiar with at this point. They will be, these are site modifications, mostly landscape, hardscape modifications that have occurred, and some requests regarding building color on 2 of the units. They're scheduled to go before ACCA next, not next, I keep saying it's next week, but because of the elections, we're pushed off to the 15th. So we'll have feedback from ACCA when we meet again on the 17th. And it's a site plan modification, so there's not a requirement for a public hearing on that. But that's our last app, our only new receipt for the month.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if this is the right time, but to say it, but I won't be at that meeting. And Shona, I think you're not able to attend either. Elliot, my apologies. I think you'll be in charge of that meeting. I'm going to be in a different time zone where unless I get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm just not going to attend. Even though these items are very, very important ones, I think. On that note,
We
maybe
could give you a wake-up call if you need one.
I appreciate that. But thank you, no. I think we can move on then to approval of minutes, Elliot.
Yes. Excuse me. I have the meeting from October 20th, 2022. Members present were Snow, Hitchcock, Hay, Bodenson. Alternate present was Duza. We do have plenty for the quorum here. Okay. So entertain a motion.
I'll move.
Dr. Hay.
I'll second.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Is that okay, Aaron? He wasn't in attendance for the meeting.
Yep.
I think she designated me as a voting member today as an alternate. From an alternate.
Right, because you weren't present at the meeting, I think that, or a member, actually during the October 20th meeting.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
And to the attendees, the commissioners who were in attendance.
Okay.
I'll second.
Daryl, any changes or discussions? Hearing none, vote. All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor.
I'd like to
Opposed?
abstain.
And then abstain. Good. Okay, passed, approved.
Great, thank you. I have no further remarks. Erin, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Just another welcome, and
Yeah.
I think that I will do everything I can to get you as much educational information as possible moving forward, and I'm looking forward to meeting with you. Carol is here in town through next week, so hopefully I'll send out an email and see if we can connect either in person or through a quick a Zoom meeting.
And thank you all for serving. Great. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Elliot. And a second. Giselle, thank you. Oh, wait, did Giselle wasn't seated. Does that matter? Or I had to fill her vacancy. I don't know, technically. I think at this point, we're all happy to say goodnight.
I'll second.
I think everyone's in favor.
I think we're in favor of adjourning. Thank you all. Very informative session.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.